Welcome back. So let's dive right in. The material we're looking at is a really comprehensive documentation of the rise and the very swift, controversy-fueled collapse of that vegan teacher.
It is. The foundation is solid. It's robust, organized, and the examples are sharp. You know, the feuds with Gordon Ramsay, Mr. Beast, the really bizarre skits. It's all there.
Exactly. And that strong groundwork lets us jump right into maximizing the narrative's impact.
I agree. The material clearly establishes that this creator's career was, well, it was built entirely on weaponized outrage.
Just toxic engagement driving views.
Right. But for a piece like this, one that's aiming for high-level insight, we need to make sure the story structure doesn't just list the offenses, but really maximizes the dramatic tension of her internal collapse.
Which brings us right to structure and flow. I think we can really sharpen that moment of failure.
Okay, so my first thought is this. The narrative arc could be strengthened considerably by isolating and really emphasizing that specific moment of total self-sabotage, the moment she alienated even her support.
The document does a fantastic job laying out all the offenses, noting that she crossed, every possible line.
Every single one.
It details all the escalating targets, religious groups, political figures, but it correctly points to her argument that cats should be wiped out because they eat meat as the specific point that shattered everything.
Yes, but here's the weakness. While the cat content is correctly identified as a turning point, the current structure just treats it as another incident in a long line of controversies.
Not as the definitive rupture.
Exactly. It wasn't just another controversy. The analysis itself highlights the key distinction. This statement alienated people who already agreed with her core vegan message. This wasn't trolling anymore. This was philosophical self-immolation.
And that critical distinction isn't really given enough structural weight.
It's not. That's the key difference. The previous stunts generated hate-watching, which, was profitable for her.
This one just generated disillusionment among the few allies she had left.
100%. So the weakness is that it rushes from that cat statement right into the TikTok ban. The suggestion is to restructure the sequence, position the wiping out cats argument as the narrative climax.
The moment her own internal logic just completely imploded.
Yes. That maximizes the dramatic impact of her downfall before you even get to the platform termination.
So how do we actually do that? How do we extract that extra dramatic beat and give the implosion the weight it really deserves?
Well, we need to dedicate a focused beat to analyzing the sheer immediate irony of it all. So instead of jumping straight to the TikTok ban, we create a short section framed around the paradox.
The paradox of someone claiming moral superiority while
simultaneously advocating for the elimination of an entire species.
Exactly. That conceptual analysis sets this moment apart from the general exhaustion people felt after her earlier videos, like the George Floyd comparison.
I see. So you pause the action, analyze the philosophical failure, and then you deliver the consequence. Yes, and you use concrete evidence to anchor that pause. Frame it strongly before mentioning the ban. Maybe you detail the community response that proved the point instantly. The material mentions that cynical counterreaction, like the top comment.
Let's go steaks for everyone.
Yeah, that single comment underscores the gravity of this misstep better than any abstract description ever could. It confirms the public saw the deep, fundamental hypocrisy instantly.
It confirms she had lost the room and her remaining ally, all in one stroke.
I love that. It takes the cat comment from just a shocking incident and elevates it to the narrative's central turning point. It gives the collapse that necessary dramatic peak.
It just sharpens the entire arc.
Definitely.
That strategic failure, though, it brings up an interesting question about how her content actually worked. For our second critique, let's focus on the angle and originality here, specifically how the material analyzes the engine of her virality and why it eventually just sputtered out.
Okay, so the material would benefit from a much sharper analytical contrast between her initially successful, high-profile feuds and the later attempts at controversy that just failed to generate any real engagement.
The material is correct in identifying that her career was built almost entirely on manufactured outrage. She successfully baited huge figures like Mr. Beast and Gordon Ramsay.
Right, and it notes her current state pretty astutely. Her content is stagnating, with recent posts getting as little as 100 likes.
The metrics tell a damning story for sure, but the analysis needs to dig deeper into why that engagement engine stalled. We know outrage is engagement, but we need to articulate the strategic decay.
Was there even a strategy? Maybe she just ran out of moral lines to cross. and the audience just got exhausted by the sheer negativity.
That's certainly a factor, but a more interesting analytical model, I think, is to view her career through two very distinct phases of engagement strategy. We need to analyze the strategic difference between phase 1 and phase 2.
And the weakness right now is that the material correctly identifies the result, the stalling metrics, but not the underlying mechanical shift.
So tell me about the mechanics of these two phases.
Phase 1 was all about targeting massive, high-value figures. Ramsay, Mr. Beast, that drew 60 million views just when Ramsay responded to her, as the document points out.
Right.
Crucially, this was high-value content because it provided fertile ground for the entire reaction ecosystem to profit from. People could stitch her, duet her, mock her. They could make their own engagement off the interaction. She was creating content fuel.
The outrage wasn't just for her, it was for every creator who could react to her. She was feeding the machine.
Exactly. She was an essential commodity in the attention economy. Phase 2, though, targeting figures like the deceased Queen Elizabeth or, non-responsive animals like cats, that was just unproductive revulsion.
You can't successfully duet a dead monarch or stitch a cat.
You can't. The content shifted from being controversial debate fodder to just generating unproductive moral disgust. Nobody wanted to touch it. There was no economic incentive to engage with pure toxicity that offered no counter-narrative potential.
So the value proposition of her outrage changed dramatically. It stopped being profitable for other creators and just became this pure toxicity that people and other creators had to scroll past for their own self-preservation. That's a sophisticated failure.
It is. So my suggestion here is to introduce a specific, modeled section that contrasts her two phases of engagement strategy, explain precisely how the shift in targets changed the dynamic. She essentially ran out of valuable targets who were willing to play ball.
Or whose large audiences could be leveraged by other creators.
Right. And without that high-value external engagement, the whole system just collapsed internally.
We can use the existing data points to illustrate this perfectly. They're very powerful.
We absolutely should. We should clearly use the contrast between the 60 million views from Gordon Ramsay's sarcastic, high-profile response, which, the material rightly noted, did more damage to her reputation than any serious criticism, and her current dismal engagement figures.
The 1 to 5,000 YouTube views, the 100 TikTok likes.
Exactly. Link her failure to find these high-value, profitable targets to her current inability to generate viral content. This makes the stagnating metrics evidence of strategic decay, a failure in the marketplace of attention rather than just abstract audience fatigue.
That's incredibly actionable. It reframes her downfall not just as a consequence of being morally terrible, which is, obvious, but as a strategic failure to maintain a sustainable, toxic business model in the attention economy.
And that deeper layer of analysis is what's going to elevate this submission.
Okay, now let's look at the ultimate significance of this whole saga. The so what factor. Where does this story fit into the larger conversation about digital culture?
Well, the material makes a strong case for the personal consequence. She lost millions of followers, had her main account terminated, and is now primarily a punchline. The analysis ends with her trying to blame viewers' guilt for her termination.
And that's where it feels a little incomplete. It ends so abruptly on her personal fate, and it overlooks the opportunity to discuss the wider implications of her career. The suggestion is that the material needs to deepen the so what beyond her personal story by exploring the broader sociological significance of her whole approach.
That is exactly the missed opportunity. The specific issues raised, like the ethics of sustained hate watching, the actual threshold for platform moderation, and the severe damaging effect of her communication style on the viability of a political movement, in this case veganism,
all of that is just glossed over. The weakness is that the conclusion confines the story to a biography instead of a case study.
Right. So the suggestion is to integrate a concluding analytical section that leverages the specifics in the document, like the 106,000 dislikes on that I Can't Breathe video and the eventual TikTok termination, to comment on modern digital activism and platform behavior.
This requires drawing out the sociological and platform-centric context. How would we structure that?
I'd use the data point that even vegan supporters themselves were shocked and criticized her for making light of serious issues. Use that to frame a discussion on the damage she caused to her own movement's credibility. It's a perfect case study in how leveraging genuine tragedy for controversy ultimately repels the very audience you claim to represent.
That gives the discussion a relevant stake beyond her personal fame. But let's go back to the platform action.
The termination happened shortly after the cat video. Is the document too quick to assume the cat comment was the sole trigger?
I don't think we can be certain, and this is where the analysis needs to pose a challenging question to the audience. I would suggest adding a question about where platforms truly draw the line. Was the termination really about the specific and absurd cat comment, or was it a delayed, accumulated reaction to the sustained, high-volume negative engagement driven by her comparisons of animal suffering to real human tragedy, specifically the George Floyd reference?
That video, the one comparing animal agriculture to the George Floyd tragedy, generating those 106,000 dislikes, that sustained, ethically complex outrage might be the real factor that triggered platform action, not just the single, absurd cat video.
Precisely. And by asking that question, you're adding relevance that goes beyond her biography and into the internal calculus of moderation teams.
We should use her as a mirror for platform moderation policies. Look at how the sheer volume of negative reaction, of hate watching, eventually becomes a liability for the platform itself, forcing their hand.
Yes. At some point, the controversy doesn't generate engagement revenue. It generates brand risk. And analyzing that pivot point will give the conclusion far greater weight and impact.
If we connect the failure of her Phase 2 strategy, the low-value, high-discussed content, with that ultimate regulatory action, the entire narrative just locks into place. She stopped being profitable for the ecosystem, and then she became a risk for the platform itself.
It paints a complete picture of a self-destructive media operation.
This has been incredibly constructive. Okay, for the listener, we have identified 3 major areas where this robust documentation can be sharpened. First, on structure. Sharpen the narrative climax by isolating and emphasizing that wiping out Kat's comment as the irreversible philosophical rupture, distinct from all her prior controversies.
Second, we need to add analytical depth by creating a clear contrast between her strategic phase. Model the shift from drawing high-value, high-profit engagement by targeting influencers like Gordon Ramsay to the low-return toxicity of her later content, which signaled a real strategic decay in the attention economy.
And finally, broaden the conclusion's so what factor. Move beyond her personal termination to explore the broader sociological significance. Specifically, examine the damage she did to digital activism and, crucially, analyze the actual threshold for platform moderation policies using her most extreme examples of negative engagement.
The documentation you submitted is incredibly detailed, and by implementing these structural and analytical adjustments, you'll maximize its impact and relevance. You'll turn a great summary into a really powerful piece of editorial commentary.
We are genuinely excited to see the next iteration. Take these suggestions, make those adjustments, and submit your work back in for a follow-up critique. Until next time, keep challenging yourself to refine your craft.